Among the dusty annals of American vehicle history, there is a name that lingers like a ghost. It was a car faster than a Jaguar, smoother than a Cadillac, and so luxurious that only Hollywood stars dared to sign its bill. Everything was in place for it to become a legend. If not for a cunning sequence of circumstances, it should never have been born. Because underlying that perfection was a terrible paradox. The company discreetly paid $1,000 every time a car left the facility. Not because sales weren't good. In fact, the more the company sold, the faster it plunged into the abyss. A death sentence was written as soon as the first line appeared on the drafting board. Furthermore, who was behind the 1950s most stylish financial suicide? Not a Detroit engineer, not an independent racer, but a cheap TV salesman who liked wearing red underwear and shouting into the camera. Someone who seemed most fit for low-budget commercials, but who went on to create the most conspicuous car in America. Is this a naive passion or a major mistake? Let's travel back in time to find the answer. To understand why the Muntz Jet exists, we need to travel back to the American West in the late 1940s, when small machine shops and craftspeople were still the true force behind speed. In that setting, Frank Curtis developed into a metal expert, a craftsman who flourished on the sound of hammers hitting steel and engines roaring on the Indy 500 practice grounds. He was neither an advocate of commercial philosophy, a businessman, or a marketer. For Curtis, an automobile was an artistic production, and speed was the language. Based on this idea, he created the Curtis Sport Car, KSC, in 1949. Many historians have subsequently referred to it as the precursor to the post-war American sports car. With racing in mind, the KSC was a two-seater roadster, lightweight construction, honest steering input, and just enough power to feel every turn on the road. Hand-formed aluminum sheets, which were only utilized by professional racing teams at the time, were used to make the body. Its robust tube frame was hand-welded with the precision of a craftsman who had spent his entire life in a workshop. The KSC's main component was the Ford Flathead F8 engine. They are not the strongest, but they are quite reliable and easy to modify. When paired with the lightweight aluminum body, the KSC turned into a weapon that allowed the driver to feel every vibration and the tire's delicate cornering. It was devoid of any luxuries, including a radio and air conditioning, only metal, sound, and speed. It was the essence of a machine for individuals who wanted to hear the road speak. But such innocence becomes a fatal flaw. The American market was changing in the 1950s. They desire a car that is not only fast, but also luxurious, comfortable, and capable of attracting the neighbor's attention. Curtis knew about speed, but he didn't know about the market. The low sales of KSCs made it impossible for him to continue production. When he needed an investor, Earl Muntz was not the one he had expected. In 1950, Muntz went to a KSC with the intention of buying it as a gift for his girlfriend. But when he stood before the small roadster, he noticed more than a present. He saw the chance to create a brand new, high-end American car. One as elegant as a Cadillac, as powerful as a race car, and as brash as Hollywood. However, Muntz said that the car needed to be bigger, longer, more expensive, and loud enough to attract the attention of the upper class. Then, for a sum that was unimaginable at the time, he decided to pay $200,000 to Curtis in Glendale, California, for the whole design, tooling, and manufacturing plant. There was more to it than just business. Only a mad person like Muntz could have anticipated how a raw diamond would be cut and polished. Following the official founding of the Muntz Automotive Company, his first task was to alter the vehicle's design. The KSC's 100-inch wheelbase made it ideal for sharp turns, but it was far too small to have the luxurious look that Muntz wanted. He had the two-seat roadster stretched by an additional 13 inches to make place for a rear seat and convert it to a 4-seat convertible. Its agility would be reduced, and its natural athletic balance would be destroyed, the engineers said. But Muntz only shrugged. He believed that customers did not purchase steering angle precision. When the lights were flashing, they decided to get out of the car. The larger body made the aluminum structure of the KSC increasingly unfeasible. Aluminum was too expensive, too difficult to form, and required too many hours of work. Muntz switched entirely to pressed steel as it was easier to weld and more suited for small-scale production. But that decision came at the expense of an approximate $4,000 weight increase, turning the car from a racer into a Cadillac-sized symbol of luxury. Muntz believed that was exactly the form Hollywood was seeking. The car's weight was compensated for by its significantly stronger heart. Muntz immediately seized the Ford Flathead V8 from the KSC. He wanted something stronger, something that growled with strength. The Cadillac 331 V8, which produced power that even seasoned test drivers were astounded by, was consequently put in the engine bay of the first aircraft. When the Cadillac supply proved difficult, he switched to the Lincoln 337 side-valve V8. The car's lifespan and smoothness allowed it to perform as well as Muntz had anticipated, even though it had fewer horsepower. A muscular beast, wearing a tailored outfit. Depending on the customer's preference, the car may have a hydroatic automatic gearbox or a 3-speed Borg-Warner manual. Whatever their decision, the Muntz Jet possessed a very incongruous disposition. Heavy but agile, bulky but strong. Few believed it was possible given its size and weight, but journalists at the time reported that the aircraft outperformed the Jaguar XK1 120 over long, straight stretches in California. But it wasn't the chassis or the engine that made the M-Jet famous. It was the inside. Muntz thought about it more than any engineer in Detroit at the time. The dashboard was padded for safety. To reduce injuries in collisions, a flexible column was used in the steering wheel. The control knobs were placed into the surface to prevent damage in the event of a strike. Ideas that existed for years before Detroit. Then came the knowledge that could only be conjured after Muntz. Anyone who wanted to flaunt luxury in true California style may do so by accenting the inside with genuine alligator leather. The icebox placed into the rear armrest functioned as a little bar for movie stars who needed a drink before traveling down the coast to Malibu after leaving the studio at midnight. It wasn't a technological feature. It was a way of life in a car. By the time the Muntzification process was complete, Frank Curtis's lightweight KSC was all but gone. The heavyweight Muntz Jet took its place. It was audacious and obviously theatrical. It was no longer a race car. It was a rolling performance, a straightforward declaration that, on occasion, the atmosphere you create when you arrive to a Beverly Hills party is a more accurate measure of wealth than the pace you reach. But as the spotlights went off and the festivities ended, Earl Muntz quickly realized the limits of the territory he was standing on. Hollywood, sunlight, and wealthy customers were all there in California, but it lacked one crucial element: a supply network. All parts, regardless of size, had to be sent from Detroit to the West Coast, which led to high costs and inconvenient delivery times. The most significant strategic decision of Muntz's auto-building career was to move the entire company to Evanston, Illinois, which was nearer to Detroit, the component supplier, and the hard realities of business. Moving the production not only changed the jet's location, but also its appearance. Engineers in Illinois continued to expand the car by a few more inches to give it a longer and smoother form that matched the evolving aesthetics of the early 1950s. The design seemed more cohesive and stable because the fenders, which had previously been assembled in California in separate sections, were now produced as a single unit. Most notably, Muntz employed fiberglass, a material that no one at the time dared to use in a mass-produced car. The jet's removable fiberglass hardtop was one of the earliest examples of this material being used in American automobiles, signaling a change in focus for an industry still plagued by problems with steel and aluminum. There was more to the growth method than merely improving the design. Muntz saw that the Jet was unable to compete with Detroit through technological advertising. Thus, he used the famous social influence of Hollywood. Celebrities like Mickey Rooney, Clark Gable, and Clara Arabeau showed up with the plane because of its originality and daring, not because of contracts. Muntz did not need banners and brochures. He only needed to show up at a glamorous party, start laughing, and hand over the jet keys to someone prominent. From then on, the car talked for him. Creating an opulent object is one thing. Making it into an icon is an additional option. In California and later in Illinois, Muntz was able to do both. The Jet wasn't liked by everyone. It served as a platform for people who wanted to show that they deviated from the norm. It wasn't just expensive. In a way that went against business logic itself, it was expensive. Despite the appearance of assurance and grandeur carried by the Muntz aircraft, the reality within the facility was a boiling tempest from which Earl Muntz could never escape. Each aircraft was built by skilled craftspeople. Every steel sheet was pressed by hand. Every weld was eye-adjusted, and every inner thread was sewn as if creating a personalized garment. The aircraft was not a produced product. It was a handcrafted object masquerading as a vehicle, but it became a pecuniary punishment by definition. From California to Illinois, material costs rose with each redesign, and no major automaker dared to equal the number of work hours required for a single aircraft. Cadillac optimized manufacturing to produce thousands of vehicles per week, whereas Muntz struggled to finish a few cars each month. Gaining a stylistic advantage comes at the cost of losing ground in the real-world corporate sector. The computation of profit and loss came next. This chilling number is still recited throughout history as a warning. The Muntz Jet cost as much as a typical suburban house at $5,500. The actual cost of production, however, was around $6,500. This meant that every time a buyer eagerly grabbed the keys to the aircraft and walked out of the showroom, Earl Muntz squandered about $1,000 of his own funds. No pricing mistake occurred. It was an internal economic structure that went beyond saving. The Jet wasn't worthless, ironically. It attracted wealthy people, artists, and those looking for a car unlike any other. However, the more difficult the reality, the more customers it attracted. The more it sold, the faster Muntz died. A business strategy that disregarded all industry survival standards. Muntz once hoped that this was only the start. He believed that if enough people drove jets on the streets, the Muntz brand would become well known and help his expanding TV and radio business, or that if manufacturing increased, costs would go down. But that miracle never happened. Due of his limited resources, hand-built manufacturing was unable to accelerate. As unpaid invoices increased and suppliers began to decline, Muntz was forced to write the company's obituary by 1954. The actual number of jets produced was only about 198, despite many later reports claiming 394. But according to historians, 198 perfectly describes the aircraft's characteristics. A piece of art too beautiful to last, too expensive to prosper, and too defiant to blend in with the harsh business world. Even though Munar Company failed after just 4 years, the impact it left behind was far greater than the 198 cars that were ever put on the road. The Muntz Jet was designed to be short-lived. It was created as a means of testing ideas that Detroit hasn't dared to attempt in a long time. The aircraft gave rise to the concept of the personal luxury car, a class of vehicles built more for style, comfort, and uniqueness than just performance. Before the Ford Thunderbird, the Riviera, or the Mark series, this path had been observed by a TV salesman, but it was not the only effect of the Jet. When Earl Muntz was building a car that was quiet enough to listen to music while driving, he had the idea for an in-car audio system. This led to the creation of the Muntz stereo pack. The cassette and the ensuing automotive audio industry were modeled around the original 4-track tape system, an invisible legacy that endured longer than any remaining plane. The price of a restored Muntz Jet may currently range from $100,000 to $200,000. It is more a result of the story than the actors. A story of boldness, recklessness, and the fragile beauty of a desire that went beyond business limits. Ultimately, the MSC car company shows that sometimes having too big of a goal in a too realistic reality might lead to death rather than a technical glitch, error, or passion, perhaps both. Unquestionably, though, it was one of the most stylish financial suicides the American auto industry has ever witnessed. If the tale of the Muntz Jet touched you in any way, please like this video. This will inform the algorithm that stories that have been forgotten for a long time still need to be revived. If you have ever seen, handled, or even driven a jet or any other unique 1950s vehicle, please leave a comment. The channel continues to track the footsteps of ancient devices by using their memories as fuel. Since there are still many cars out there that require accurate information, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. I'll see you later. I'll see you later. I'll see you later.